To create a storage account, you'll have to go to all services, and here you'll see storage account at the beginning itself, or else you can search for storage account also. Now let me go ahead and create a new storage account, and you know how to do that. Click on this create button, and here we'll have to provide the subscription and the resource group, and then let's create a new storage account. And this would be the name. The problem is that you cannot have hyphen in storage account because this is not allowed. So that's why I cannot use either hyphen or underscore also. Okay, then we have the region, and then we have preferred storage type. There are 4 types of storages, and we'll have to select one of them as the preferred storage type. And here we have Azure Blob Storage or ADLS Gen 2, which can be our preferred storage, or we can select Azure Files or Tables and Queue Storage as the preferred storage type. I'll be selecting ADLS. And then we have primary workload, which is to define what is the best suitable workload for this storage account. I'll select Big Data Analytics, which is nothing but data engineering. And then we have performance. There are 2 types of performance available. One is the standard performance, which is the recommended option for most of the scenarios. And the name is general purpose V2 account. Then we have premium performance. And in premium performance, we have 3 different premium account types. We have block blobs, file shares, and page blobs. We'll talk about this in future videos, but as of now, let me select the standard performance. And then we have redundancy. I have talked about redundancy in the initial videos during the introduction of Azure Cloud. So we have locally redundant storage, we have geo redundant storage, zone redundant storage. You already know what these 3 terms are. Then you have geo zone redundant storage. This is something different. What it means is that the data will not only be replicated across geographical locations or across regions. After the replication also, it would be stored in a zone redundant fashion. So I'll be selecting the locally redundant storage. It is the lowest cost. That's why I'm selecting this, which is LRS. So this is the first page. And then we have multiple other options that we'll have to provide. Click on next, and here we have mostly security. Whether we need secure transfer for REST API operations or not, you should always enable it. Then we have enablement of anonymous access on individual containers. I'm not enabling it. Then you have default to Microsoft Entra authorization in the Azure portal. That is not needed. Then you have TLS version, and then hierarchical namespace. Now this is an important one, because if we do not enable hierarchical namespace, we will not be able to use ADLS or Azure Data Lake Storage, which means that the blob storage cannot be used for data engineering purposes. So you should always enable hierarchical namespace, and it is by default enabled if I select the workload type as big data analytics. Because I had selected the workload type to be big data analytics, that's why the hierarchical namespace has been selected automatically. It also says here that hierarchical namespace complemented by ADLS Gen 2 endpoint enables file directory semantics, etc., etc. Then you have access protocols. Azure Blob Storage and ADLS Gen 2 endpoints are provisioned by default. Whether you want to enable SFTP or not, whether you want to enable network file system or NFS or not. Then you have blob storage security. I'll not change anything. Then finally you have access tier. Here we have hot access, cool access, and cold access. Hot access is optimized for frequently accessed data and everyday usage conditions, which means that if we select this access tier as hot, the data would be stored mostly in premium SSDs. Then you have second tier, which is cool storage or cool access tier. It is optimized for infrequently accessed data and backup scenarios. Then you have cold, which is optimized for rarely accessed data and backup scenarios. And if you're using it for either data engineering or GenAI or machine learning use cases, you should always select the access tier as hot. Now, next is another important component, which is called network access. And there are different network access. We have public access, and then you have private endpoint, and then you have network routing also. So let's try to understand this one by one. First is the public access. And if we enable public access, all the resources in the storage account can be accessed anywhere through a public network. By default, it is enabled. We can disable it also if we want, or we can secure it by something called security perimeter. I'll not talk about the security perimeter. We'll enable it, and then we can define the public network access scope also. Now, if you enable, it says whether you want to enable it for all networks, meaning for the entire internet, or you can enable it from selected virtual networks and IP addresses. This is another option. I'll not discuss it as of now. In the next video, I'll talk about the public network access. Then you have private endpoint also. And I talked about private endpoint earlier. If you have a private subnet in your virtual network or in your VNet, you should always create a private endpoint and then communicate with the storage account using the private endpoint. I'll be enabling this later on, but right now let me go ahead and just create the storage account. Then you have network routing, whether you want to use Microsoft network routing or internet routing. The preference would be Microsoft network routing. And if we use Microsoft network routing, if we have, let's say, edge locations, which are CDNs or content delivery network, then Azure will try to send the data as soon as possible to enter Microsoft's network. Otherwise, it will use internet routing. Then we have the data protection, whether you want to have point in time restore for containers, we can enable it, but it is not needed. Then you have soft delete for blobs. What it means is that if we enable this, then if we delete the objects or the blobs inside of the storage, it would be retained for certain number of days, after which it would be deleted permanently. It is similar to recycle bin, and you can mention the retention days for the deleted blobs. I'll not enable it. Then you have soft delete for containers, you have soft delete for file shares, and then you have tracking also, which is versioning. If we enable versioning, then if we upload the same blob or the same object in your storage account, a new version would be created rather than replacing the older file. Then you have access control, and here we have version level immutability support. We cannot enable it unless we enable the versioning. Then you have encryption, which is pretty self-explanatory. I do not think I have to discuss this. Then you have tags, and then a review plus create. I'll go through some validation, whether the syntaxes are correct, whether the options are correct or not. And then if I click on create, the storage account would be created. The deployment is complete. Let's look at all resources. And here I should be able to see the storage account. I'll have to go to the next page. And this is the storage account, 3IAM storage ACC. And you can see all the options that we have provided. The data lake storage is enabled because we have enabled the hierarchical namespace. These are the options for security. We have file service, which is also enabled. Networking is also enabled. So public network access is enabled. Obviously, we'll change it later on once we do the hands-on. But as of now, the storage account has been created. There are other options here like activity logs, tags. Then you have access control. We'll talk about access control in the next section. Then we have data migration, storage browser. We can look at blob containers, file shares. What is the number of blob containers? What is the number of blobs or objects that are there? What is the total amount of data that is stored? Similarly, you can get such information for file shares, tables, queue storages, etc. Now, in the data storage, we have containers, file shares, queues, and tables. Now, let's talk about file shares, queues, and tables first. File shares is for file storage. If you want to have a file storage in your storage account, you can create a file share here. If you create file share, that would be different than the queue storage or table storage or ADLS. Now, the file share is completely separate than the blob storage or ADLS. Similarly, using this queues option, we can create a queue and we can use this as a queue storage. Likewise, we can create table storage also. And containers is used for blob. Now, to store blob data, we'll have to add a container, which I'll talk about later on. Then we have various network options. I'll dig into the networking option shortly, but as of now, we have created the storage account, and let's continue with the remaining portion of the videos.